Well, populations around the world are divided, and much of this is being fought out and explained, if you like, on social media. Let's bring in Jeremy McClellan, who's a comedian and broadcaster and joins us live now from the United States. Jeremy, thanks very much indeed for joining us. First of all, I have to say, some people are really suggesting that this is the most polarizing event ever to dominate social media. What do you think?
It is. I mean, when you're on social media, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, on Instagram, you can barely find anyone mentioning anything else. This is totally crowded out every other discussion. But, you know, right now it is the most clarifying and most interesting and probably, I mean, I think the most important discussion that we can be having.
Now, America politically is a great supporter of Israel. It always has been historically. It's always guaranteed and underwritten its existence and its security. And yet I would imagine that social media in the United States tells a more complicated story.
Yes, absolutely. There's a huge difference between the younger generation who isn't really susceptible to the usual propaganda techniques, much more cynical towards, you know, watching social media much more critically and digesting it themselves, as well as also separating Israel's policies towards our much more positive attitudes towards the Jewish people. So, you know, versus an older generation that growing up was very influenced by Christian Zionism and other efforts by Israel to influence American public opinion.
Of course, does social media have this tendency to oversimplify? For example, we know the White House is taking a certain public position, but we also know that within the State Department, for example, there are a great many analysts who understand very deeply the complexities of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the importance of limiting settlement programs, the importance of allowing autonomous regions within the Palestinian territories, and understanding that these are all delicate issues that people have fought hard diplomatically to try to advance. Does social media, in a way, cheapen that? Does it give the American public the impression that it's a much more simple debate than it actually is?
Well, I think any issue, when you get down to it, is extremely complicated. I mean, people write PhDs on the very most simple of things. Like, no matter what the subject, you can find someone writing a PhD issue on something very, very particular about it. But when it comes to making sort of moral judgments in this world, some things are very black and white. It is, you know, we should roundly condemn the actions of Israel towards the Palestinians. And it is complicated in the sense that everything is complicated. But I think that there's a tendency sometimes to say, oh, it's so complicated, there's all these delicate issues, when, you know, just as a way to sort of kick the can down the road so that we don't actually have to address anything.
Now, you're a comedian, you're a broadcaster, but a lot of your work is designed around comedy and stand-up and that element of the culture. I've had a look at some of your stuff before we started this conversation today, and I can see that you are deriving material from something that many people would shy away from. People would be nervous, I would imagine, from trying to derive humor from the situation that Gaza, the situation that the Palestinians and the Israelis find themselves in. And you, with a slightly ironic tone, you've managed to derive some humor from that. Do you feel you're walking a tightrope, or do you just feel you have to speak out?
Well, it is tricky. You know, every comedian, I think, who has years, you know, on their belt of doing this knows, you know, hopefully how to navigate this. But look, when you go to any sort of funeral, if you go to any sort of you know, if you go to a hospital and you see people in mourning, no matter where you are, you find people making jokes. You find people using humor to process reality, no matter what the situation is. Even in the midst of Gaza, even people getting, you know, blown to bits and everything like that, you still find people, you still find humor. You still find people using jokes to make points about the world, to you know, sort of delight in what is good in the world. And I think that, you know, for me, this is a very important topic that I've been, you know, obsessed with for my entire life. And I think that, you know, when a comedian looks at something like this, they process it through the lens of humor. Just like when a poet looks at something like this, they are writing poetry in their head. When a musician looks at something like this, they're writing music about it. It's just how we process reality.
Jeremy, pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us
Thank you.
this evening here on TRT World.
Thank you.